Youniss.
Hey.
Hey. Ja, zet die translator maar op.
Testing.
Bra, bra.
Sounds.
Futures.
Visuals.
Images.
Images.
Images of the future.
Calibrating.
Calibrated. Great. We can finally register with your translator these months of dialogue we've had, and you guys, you can actually see what we're saying.
And as such, we will now disappear.
So, Youniss, you know, I'm a futurist or a futures researcher. My field isn't really very well known, but as a futures researcher, I look at how people actually imagine the future. We say what their images of the future are, what their ideas of the future are. I've talked with, over 1,000 people about that. And so you can imagine I spend a lot of time in the future thinking about it. And to begin with, I'd like to ask you if the future is actually a topic you ever think about.
Well, I think like any sane human, I think about the future. How could you not? I try to envision what has influence on me. Be it, for example, for the first time in my lifetime, there's a war happening on this continent close by enough to feel. And I start thinking about, will this impact me in the future or not? It's something that I thought was unthinkable in this lifetime.
So we're not even 2 minutes into a conversation about the future, and we're already talking about war.
I think we should file that. Say war.
War. File as image of the future. File as driver of change. Well, this is really my normal practice. This line of questioning is what I do all the time. And so it's part of my everyday work. And I wonder if in your practice as a musician and a visual artist, you also have a future orientation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like my work that I make, like this translator, for example, it's so beautifully encapsulating our conversation. I make it at a certain day, or it might be yesterday, it might be a week ago, whatever. But I don't make it for that day. I make it for a point in the future, be it 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now. I don't know what I have with the number 2, but clearly that is something driving me. But it's something I make, and at that point it will be used. So I feel like in my practice and in my daily life, the future is something I wake up with and go to sleep with. And I feel maybe the audience has that as well. Do you wake up and go to sleep with ideas about the future? Yeah. Okay, see?
Well, being able to think about the future, foresight, it's an innate human capacity. We're born with it. So everyone can do it, and everyone does it. Perhaps that's something to file.
Yeah. Say everyone.
Everyone. Now, when you were talking about the next 2 days, the next 2 weeks, the next 2 years. To me, and to futurists in general, we call that the extended present. It's not actually the future from our perspective, because it's just like a continuation from the present.
Well, let me be frank, and I want to ask you a question now, so I feel like we should switch positions. Okay. If the future is not an extension of the past, let me rephrase that. If the future is more than an extension of the past and an extension of the present, I keep saying past, I mean present, is different, then what's the point in thinking about the future?
Oh, you want to know the point of thinking about the future? Well, you see, I learned from my dear colleague Reid Reiner that any decision you take in the present, any decision you take today, is based on your images of the future, on what you expect is going to happen. Now, if your images of the future are fuzzy or incoherent, then your decisions in the present will be fuzzy and incoherent. And as if that isn't reason enough, it's also important that, we kind of feel lost in the present. Our present is complex and contradictory and even chaotic. And so a lot of us, because of that, actually don't really have an easy time navigating through it. And that's why keeping your eye on a point further away rather than really nearby, where everything is moving fast and changing all the time, but keeping your eye on a point that is further away in time can help you find direction in the present. It's like a compass.
So you're saying we should think about the future for today?
That's it. We can file that, like as, let's file it.
Say today.
Today. File as tactics for post-normal times. We want to go there. So I'm going to walk to that chair. Let's see. We can talk about the future of anything. We can talk about the future of X, Y, or Z. Let's file X, Y, and Z.
Say X, Y, and Z.
X, Y, and Z. So, you're my X. No, not quite. You're my Y? Also not. Let's make you my Z. Z. How old are you?
I'm 28 years old.
28. Add another 28.
56.
56. What year will it be?
2050.
2050. A nice round figure. That's what we get a lot when we think about the future. Once in my lifetime, it was the year 2000. So now we have 2050. What, from your perspective, would be the best thing that could happen in those 28 years' time?
To me? Or for the world?
Oh, well, what's on your mind? What would you like to talk about?
I think as a human, in these weird times and in this ever-changing world, I'd like to connect more with people, be it people close to me, my local, smaller community, or be in a worldwide, global scale. I guess some people would call that peace on earth, maybe?
Oh, peace. That's a universal answer. As I said, I've interviewed more than 1,000 people over more than 20 years. And the answer, peace on earth, well, it's near Christmas, so it's really suitable even. It's actually an answer we get a lot. At the same time, people have a really hard time imagining what that is. What peace on earth would actually look like, what it would be like. I think we're not very good at it. But at the same time, we really need it. So let's file it.
Let's say peace. Peace.
File as image of the future. Connect to fuzzy. Now, this was a really broad answer, something that everybody says, something that's really general. But we can also zoom in on something that is closer to you. That's always much easier to talk about the future of something you know well. So for you, I think I would like to ask you, how do you think about the future of music?
I feel like I'm somewhat of an atypical musician. Whoa, translator, what is going
dying.
on with you?
Oh, well, I think you're going to have to touch some buttons
So
there.
I will talk about the future of music while I sort out this translator.
The fans.
Sometimes technology needs some hard loving. The future of music. So I feel like I'm quite an atypical musician. I didn't have any formal schooling for multiple reasons. But at 17, I discovered that you could make music with your computer, and I thought that was quite interesting. So I downloaded some music software, and I started making music. And I was like, whoa, the sounds that are coming out of that thing are not what I get out of a guitar, or what I think I can get out of a guitar. So I was like, this is crazy, and I can keep on making music for the rest of my life, and I'll never find the final sound, or whatever you'd like to call it. But then a couple of years ago, I started knowing more about music theory and how music technology works, and I was making music that wasn't Western. I was delving into my roots, or part of my roots, where I was composing from Arabic tonality. And I started to notice that this music technology that we use is not built on working with other tonalities from other communities, cultures, and stuff like that. So I started noticing these limitations in the software, and I got really sad because of that, because I was like, whoa, why can't I not make this thing? So the future for music for me would be to not limit through one scope, especially being this Western scope, and have it more broad so that everyone, everywhere can really, truly create and be free in their creation process.
Wow. So I think we are going there, right? I asked you about music, and you talked about this Western standard, but to do so, you talked about technology. And really, and again, that's a topic that always seems to arise when people want to discuss the future. Our technologies are really important in how we actually conceive of the future. You talked about this tool that you are using to make music, and also you indicated that it's blocking you in somehow. Now, our relationship with our tools, with our technologies, is quite special. And don't think that technology is only digital technology, right? It's not just your computer. It's not just our phones. Even, these glasses that we are both wearing, they're a piece of technology. And we're not the only ones here. I'm sure that lots of you over there also have glasses on. Could you just take them off for a moment and lift them into the air? Very well. So that's quite a few, all cyborgs, all of us. It's actually quite uncomfortable, so you can put them back on. It's especially uncomfortable when you're trying to see something in a theater, of course. But that discomfort with removing ourselves from our technologies, it suggests a really, really close relationship with it. We are like in some kind of a symbiosis, maybe some form of mutation with our technologies. Marshall McLuhan said that we shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. So I have another question for you. Do you think, how would it be possible for this tool, or would it be possible for this tool that you are using to make music, not to shape you or your music?
Before I go into that, I feel like we're at an important intersection and we need to file the word tools.
Tools,
so
yes.
Say tools.
Tools! Well done.
No, you all done. On that note, yeah, I think it's maybe time for me to name drop someone.
Oh, yeah?
It doesn't only have to be the scientist.
No.
So in my practice and in my world of composing and working with music, there's a musicologist, musician, theoretician called Kemalami, who's Iraqi-British, and he has a theory that he proposes for the future development of music software.
Right.
That is to advocate for fretlessness in the digital age. Now what that means is I have these two beautiful, very different and very similar at the same time instruments here. This guitar, for example, has a beautiful neck, and in this neck there's all these indents called frets. Now what that means is that if I play an E string, you hear an E, and if
I don't hear anything.
Can you hear that? Okay, cool. Should have had an acoustic guitar, and I do not have those. So here we are. But if I hold between these two frets, that's an F, F sharp, G sharp. I'm bending it a bit much, but it goes up, and these frets lock you in that note, so there's no way of playing in between those two notes. Mm-hmm. Now, if I bend the string, for example, then I kind of go in between that note, but I can't kind of play in that bend, so it like keeps you locked. And that is what frets do to an instrument, which is nice because it allows you to play these notes and not make as many mistakes. Now this oud, for example, which is an Arabic snare instrument, doesn't have frets on the neck. So if I play this C, and if I then put my finger here, it's a different note. If I can go up, but if I slide, I get way more definition in between those notes because there's no fret limiting what type of note you can play on that snare.
I see.
So Kemalami proposes to have digital instruments built around this principle where you can choose what notes you play on the neck instead of having, well, software is built on a piano and not a guitar, but having these locked frets that lock you into what you do. So I feel that fretlessness is an option. Now there are obviously limitations to that, or not limitations, but difficulties that arise with it. He built, in collaboration with different people, software where this is possible. And I've been using it for a bit, and it's super interesting, but it is difficult to use. The software that we use now is very accessible, very easy to encapsulate, which allows anyone to get in and start making notes, making music because it's very visual. Whereas this is also very visual, but works through different principles, which may be limiting because it seems like a lot. It seems like very complex to dive into it, which may be a problem in itself, that people have to unlearn this path they're on and this way of working and then relearn something completely new to go somewhere else.
Yeah, we have a concept for that. It's called path dependency. So we are really on, it's not easy once you have more options to actually figure out, how to use them and what to do with them. There is some kind of limitation. You can't be lazy. You have to, overcome this novelty also, because it's especially the change that makes it harder for you, right? And so also, I think it'd be interesting to actually file that concept of path dependency, because, getting away from the standard that has been set for us It's a real challenge, and it's one that we deal with in futures a lot.
Say path dependency?
Path dependency. Okay.
What do we file that as?
I'll file it as a barrier. Barrier. File as a barrier. Then, from path dependency, where do we go?
Well, I mean, I wonder what then the possibilities are. Maybe that's a question I can ask you. So how, if we're on this beaten path, as they say, and we're stuck in that straight line instead of that straight line, how do we get from one point to another? How do we break free from this path?
Well, we can think about many different possibilities. We can use the cone of possibilities. I'll drop another name. We call it the Voroscope because my colleague who designed this thing is called Joseph Voros. And if we want to actually get off the path we're on, we got to actually consider what the possibilities for other paths are. Now, that's something that we need to change the way we think for. Because normally we think about what possibility is the most probable, what's most likely. Or we want believable, very obvious and logical stories about the future, plausible futures. We don't consider preposterous possibilities. We don't consider the whole wide range of all the different things that might be possible. So I believe that if we want to sort of escape path dependency, we need to actually consider this whole cone of possibilities, the preposterous, the probable, the possible, the plausible.
Maybe we should follow that.
Possibilities?
Yes.
Yeah.
Say possibilities.
Possibilities. File as opening. Now, maybe we can go a little bit closer because there's something I need to add to that. It's not just possibilities, it's alternative futures. Think about different possibilities, but not just as, individual units of possibility, but as whole stories about the future. We call them generic alternative images of the future. That's something...
Mouthful.
A mouthful. But before I go into that mouthful, I need to actually emphasize that when we think about possibilities, and we have these different kinds of possibilities, the most important thing is to consider what you would actually prefer among these possibilities. You need to select your preference from the preposterous, the probable, the plausible, and from all the infinite possibilities. I say that possibilities are infinite. It doesn't mean that anything is possible. But from the possible, you need to identify your preference. We need to know what we want.
And we need to file that as well.
And file it.
Say preference.
Preference. File as cone of possibilities, reference Joseph Voros. So these 4 generic alternative images of the future that are built from this wide range of possibilities, they were identified by a colleague of mine called Jim Dater. He's a wild professor. He's my role model, actually. And what he suggests is that, because of the infinite range of possibilities, this is like what you were saying about the music. It's really hard to work with. It's not self-evident how you actually, how do you deal with the infinite? So he says, well, we can make a range of 4 different alternative images of the future that will make sure you cover, not just
the big
thing.
Scope.
Say again?
The big scope of things.
Yes, exactly. So he wants us to imagine continued growth. Now, that's not hard. It's the dominant image of the future of the present. It's, you know, what our corporations and our governments and our schools, everybody's, you know, is putting us into this idea that actually there's no other future than the continued growth future. Although, there are people who say that if we do continue as we are going, we may actually encounter collapse. And so collapse is the second generic alternative image of the future. The third one is discipline, because, you know, we can avoid collapse by organizing ourselves in a disciplined manner. That, you know, you have bottom-up green discipline scenarios, but you also have top-down, really scary, you know, civil repression type of discipline scenarios as well. And then finally, the fourth image of the future, generic image of the future, is transformation. And for transformation, what we do is we actually formulate new answers to old questions. We try to solve our issues in new ways. And because we don't have a lab where we can test how that's going to turn out, that holds risks in itself. None of these alternatives are actually, you know, better than the other, and also all of them are just like our present. They consist of the good, the bad, the ugly, the terrible, and the awesome, the wonderful. So our reality is never just good or bad. These aren't worst case and best case scenarios. They are alternatives.
Well, my brain is overflowing with new information that I don't really know what to do with.
That we are going to file these alternatives that you are overflowing with. I think we should.
Say alternatives. Alternatives.
Alternatives. Apologies.
That's
and
all good.
File as 4 generic alternative images of the future. Reference Jim Dater.
I think the thing that I'm now most interested in, because I really have no, I mean, I'm not a futurist. I don't know things. I don't know these things. I know these things. Is how do we change the future? Is that, like, with all this information, how do we change for a better future?
You want to change the future? You think you know what the future needs. A little bit like the missionaries used to in Congo. They thought they knew what these people needed. If we think about actually changing the future, rather than imagining it for today, as we said earlier, if we think about changing the future, then it's as if we find ourselves better than future generations in a way. It's like colonizing the future. Of course, I understand the reflex of wanting to protect our future and wanting to make sure it's better than some of the alternatives that we can currently see. At the same time, I think it's a dangerous thing to do because we don't know what the people after us are going to need or want. And so, with that idea, I just want to think about all the things that we filed under. We filed things as images of the future, as drivers of change, as models of change, as barriers, as fuzzy and as chaos and
incoherent.
Incoherent. Well, we didn't file for incoherent, but maybe we should have. And so, sorry, question coming up. Yeah, there we are.
Back in my sweet spot where I belong.
well, and yes, the scientist is asking questions. So I'd like to know, after hearing all these concepts, how are you thinking about the future now?
I think I may need a drink. No, I need. Well, it's a lot. It's been a lot. I think it's good to know that changing the future is not the right thing. And I think it's good to know that there's multiple scenarios and that we need to work hard and think hard to get on a different path. That is good to know, but I don't think I have like a very specific answer to what do I need to do with the future. I think I just need to keep working at what I do and think and make other people think. But I do have a question for you. So, back there. Which would be stupid to ask, to not ask if you have a futurist here. And that would be, what would be your ideal scenario for the future?
Well, I don't think we're going to get the ideal, but I'll tell you my preference. So my preference as a futurist, as you point out, is for us to have a future in which we think about the future more.
Well, I'll go home now, thank you.
I'll come back. There is a good, the real reason has something to do with that standardization that you were talking about when you were talking about music and the digital tools that you have to make it. Those tools, they don't really cater for a lot of diversity. And you were talking about war at the start of this dialogue. Well, you know a word that has a lot to do with war, and it's mutually assured destruction. You heard that? You know
Sadly,
that?
I have.
Well, yes.
It
So,
keeps me up at night.
So today the word is actually being mentioned much more often than it was when we started having this dialogue a few months ago. Mutually assured destruction is a concept we want to do away with. And we can do away with it by thinking and talking about the future more. And if we do that, we could actually get to a point where we talk about mutually assured diversity. It's where I can be the scientist who's also a bit of a crazy one, and you can be the musician with the serious historic explanation. And you know, we don't have preset expectations of each other. The only thing we know is that we want to mutually assure our diversity.
Maybe we should follow that. Diversity.
Diversity.
Say
Okay.
diversity.
Diversity. Now, I just want to insist that I do think we did the right thing. We talked and talked and talked.
And never shut up.
We never shut up, and we're about to. But I think that this is the essential bit of my preferred future. It's a future in which people talk with each other, in which there is a constant dialogue. Maybe we can also still file dialogue?
Say dialogue. Dialogue.
So file as opening the roads to the future. And I think we want to get immersed in these images that have been produced and to see what the items are that we have actually filed. Ooh, that was a little accident.
That's part of the future.
It's part of the future, yes, and there's no-fail future. Let's make sure that people understand that. Okay, so we actually filed...
War.
We filed everyone.
We filed...
Today.
Today.
We filed
X,
Y,
Y, Z.
Z. We filed peace.
Peace.
We filed tools.
Tools. Path dependency.
From path dependency, we went to possibility.
Preference.
And alternatives.
And then we went to diversity.
Diversity. And from
last,
diversity
very
to
loudly, dialogue.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, translator.
The most important part.
Merci, and merci, and merci.